Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast with Mohamed Massaquoi, former NFL wide receiver, is brought to you by Compassion International. Go to compassion.com/sports spectrum. You can sponsor a child for $38 a month and release them from poverty. You can make that difference in a child's life and give them something that every child deserves to have, and that is simply hope. Go to compassion.com/sports spectrum and sponsor a child today. Today's guest on the podcast, former NFL wide receiver Mohamed Massaquoi. Now, Mohamed was selected in the second round of the 2009 NFL draft by the Cleveland Browns, 50th player overall. He played his college ball at Georgia, where he was a first-team All-SEC wide receiver, and also graduated in just 3.5 years with a Bachelor of Science and Psychology degree from Georgia. And then Mohamed came to the NFL and played 4 seasons with the Browns, and then hung on for a couple years there with the Jets and the Jaguars before 2013, and injuries taking their toll and ending his NFL career. In the spring of 2017, while riding ATVs with friends, all-terrain vehicles, Mohamed was involved in an accident that resulted in the amputation of 4 fingers, leaving his thumb intact. And on this episode of the podcast, we talk about that injury. We talk about that accident and sort of the trauma, everything that surrounded it, and certainly his faith and how his faith was affected, whether he wrestled with the Lord at all, in finding out that he had to have his fingers amputated. We also take a look at his time playing in the NFL, playing in college, and just what he learned there. Certainly playing for Coach Richt at Georgia, a coach who wears his faith on his sleeve, and the kind of impact that Coach Richt had on Mohamed's life, not just his career in football, but his life. And we also ask him about what he misses most about playing. We talk about why he's thankful. And it's tough to be thankful when an accident like that happens, but he is, and he'll explain why. So let's get right to it. Without further ado, former NFL wide receiver, Georgia first-team All-SEC wide receiver, Mohamed Massaquoi joins us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Take a listen. Mohamed, welcome to the show.
It's truly a pleasure to be here with you. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you. Now, we're certainly going to talk about your injury and all that happened in a little bit, but I want to talk a little football for a moment, and just from a football player perspective, not the fact that everything happened with your hand, but the football perspective. You last played 5 years ago, 2013, from what I've looked up here with the Jets and Jaguars. How much do you just miss playing football right now?
I mean, I don't even know if you can explain it. I don't think anyone misses getting hurt or the business aspect of it, but just playing a game that you grew up playing a game with your friends, the competition, the excitement of performing under pressure. I don't think that ever goes away. I think guys and girls are always struggling to recreate that in other facets of life.
You made it to the NFL after a very good career in college at the University of Georgia. When did football start to become something that you realized, you know what, I'm pretty good at this thing? When did that start to kind of come to fruition for you?
I'll tell you something funny. I'm from North Carolina, and North Carolina is a big basketball state. And I had a friend who he came back to school 6'5", and I came back to school like 6 foot. And I was like, man, if I could just grow a couple inches, I'm going to stick with basketball, and I'll just do football to stay in shape. And I never grew past 6'1", 6'2". So I started to take football a little serious. And my high school team, a little fun fact, we actually had the longest win streak in U.S. history at 109 games. So coming into a situation like that, which was just heaven sent, was like, okay, if I stick with this football thing, we might be able to go places.
109 games in a row that you won. I mean, what was the first? That's insane. What was the first time that you lost a game? Was it not until college?
It's even crazier. Chris Leak was the first quarterback I had in high school when he played for Florida, and I was at Georgia and lost to Chris Leak my freshman year at Georgia, and that was the first time I had lost in middle school.
Were you able to handle the loss? I mean, you hadn't been able to do that. Like, how did you deal with it?
it was depressing for a little bit.
I have to imagine.
The competition in the SEC is a lot different than the competition in high school football.
I'd say so, but 109 games in a row and not losing since middle school, man, that'll teach you quickly. I guess they say you learn a lot about yourself in college. Adversity comes to all of us as it has to you, but just losing for that first time. Can you describe what the feelings were like? And did you have to have conversations with Coach Richt and others about, okay, we're not going to win we're not going to win every game we play, I guess, huh?
Yeah, you mean we don't go undefeated all 4 years? It was weird, but I mean, obviously when you're playing teams of that caliber, I think they might have gone on to even if they didn't win the national championship that year, they were in the running for it, and they definitely won one while I was there. So you just understand competition's a lot different, and you don't run over teams as you do in high school.
Mohamed Massaquoi is our guest here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. This is a faith and sports podcast, obviously, and we talk a lot about faith here. So I'm going to ask you about that for you. What did that look like as a kid growing up, your faith, and when did that start to take shape for you as you got older?
It's always been a part of my journey, from my great-grandma to my grandma to my mom, dad. Like, we're all strong believers in Christ, and it's one of those things that even my name, it gives me an opportunity to talk to a lot of people, just because my name would suggest that I may be Muslim, but after getting a chance to talk to people and sharing my story, sharing my testament, just sharing some of the things that God has done in my life is pretty cool. But it's just been one of those things I feel God around me all the time. He's been with me in my journey to get into the NFL and through sports. He's been with my journey through the adversity I faced last year. And I'm excited about all the doors that will be open and all the lessons to be learned for the rest of life.
What did you learn in college about your faith? You played for a very outspoken man of faith in Coach Richt, Mark Richt. He doesn't hide his faith like maybe some others might. As a coach, he wears it on his sleeve. I wonder what you learned from him as you got to college and saw your coach kind of living that out.
Just to be proud. I mean, just it's something that as we're all united as brothers and sisters in Christ, it's a big family. And the more you can inspire somebody, the more that you can help someone along their journey and be helped along your journey. Obviously, Coach Richt, he probably has his struggles just like everyone else does. So knowing other great believers that you can count on and pull on and be inspired and learn from and share your testimony and just grow, I think is very impactful.
Tell us also about playing at Georgia. You caught passes from Matthew Stafford, and you played with guys like A.J. Green and Noshawn Moreno, and obviously you got drafted into the NFL. So tell us about just your time at Georgia playing football and just what you learned and what that camaraderie was like and being a part of a team with so many talented players.
Just the friendship piece of it. You look at whether it's Stafford or Noshawn or H.A., as some of these guys would probably be Hall of Fame type players, but when you really get to know the person under the helmet, you realize that they're just great all around guys that are extremely fun to be with, guys that are lifelong friends, guys that I consider family at this point, and going through battles and really growing and, just building that bond, that camaraderie. I don't know if there's a school that's closer than Georgia guys. We hang out even to this day. There's several group messages that I'm on, and I'll wake up and I'll have 100, 200 messages, all from guys just laughing and joking. And this is, 10 years after leaving Georgia.
Yeah, I was just watching a video on Facebook. Tom Brady does this video called Tom versus Time, and I was watching it. It's really good, brand new one that just came out, and he talks about, he's a Michigan guy, and he went overseas to visit the military, and they had one of the planes had an Ohio State logo on it. And he called it out and he kind of joked about it. And he said, I don't like anything about Ohio State. There's something about college. In the NFL, you never say, I don't like anything about this team or that team. It's kind of different. College is different, though, isn't it?
It's different because you get a chance to choose where you go to college. And then on top of that, unless you do something to get kicked out or your situation is something that you just have to change it for whatever reason, you're going to be a Georgia Bulldog or you're going to be a Michigan Wolverine or you're going to be whatever your college is. And everyone shares a pretty similar experience of those 3 to 4 or 5 years that you're on campus. And you grow, you mature, into adulthood, and there's so many lifelong friendships. It's a different bond. And I could be in California or I could be in London, and if I see somebody that's Georgia, I know that we're going to just share this bond and have a good time together. And unless you're a guy like maybe Tom Brady, who's going to be a lifelong Patriot, it doesn't always work like that in pro sports because guys are moving around and the business aspect of it's a little bit different. But Georgia's always going to be the team that I root for. Georgia's always going to be home. Georgia's always going to be family.
Well,
and Georgia's always going to be the best school.
Got to get that in there, right? Go Dogs! And you earned your bachelor. You earned your Bachelor of Science in psychology in only 3.5 years from Georgia. So obviously, you took your studies, very seriously. Tell me about that aspect of it, because even my wife was watching a game the other day, a college football game with me, and she just looked and she's like, "How do they play football in college when it's really a full-time job and still go to classes and still, kind of focus on schooling?" And you did it in 3.5 years. Tell me about that side of it.
It's tough. People, they just see the product on Saturday or, if the teams play on Thursday night. But I remember our schedule being something like, you're in study hall at 6:30 and then you go get breakfast after that. Then your first class is at 8:15 and you're in class from 8:15 to probably 1, and then you go get lunch, and then you're at the facility probably at 2 to 2:30, and then you're going to be there until maybe 5:30, 6 o'clock, and then you have time to shower and eat. Then you're in study hall after that to do schoolwork, and you're probably in study hall till about 8 o'clock, and then by the time you look, you're getting home 8:30, 9 o'clock, and it's time to crash or it's time to follow up, and then you have to repeat that. And that's basically your life for a long time. And you don't really get a chance to experience college like other people who go on internships or study abroad. So in knowing that, hey, I have this small window of opportunity to, one, live out my dream as a football player and potentially go pro. But if that's a true opportunity, I want to be able to leave with my degree so I don't come back. So you're very focused, you're very driven, but at the same time, you wish that you could have the experience of other people, but it's just not real.
So is it easier? And forgive me for saying easier, I guess that's not the right word, but I guess there was the transition a little bit easier from the craziness of college to coming to the NFL, where obviously on the field it's tougher, but just, not having to study and take classes, even though you're in the the film room and watching tape. Was it a little bit easier of a transition coming to the NFL from that perspective?
It's completely different because you don't have the school piece. You don't have the part where you're walking around campus and after win or loss, you're interacting with your, the student body, the fans, or being in class and having to focus on biology or chemistry while you're preparing for Florida or LSU. It's strictly game preparation. That's a business where people, unlike scholarship or getting cut, they're coming in or they're signing new contracts through free agency. So there's a lot more moving parts. There's no such thing as your draft class is going to be there when you finish, as if your signing class is there when you finish. So the business side of it is a lot different. It's a lot more mentally fatiguing because you're so locked into the opponent. It's a lot different from a physical standpoint because your body just breaks down faster. You're dealing with guys that are just flat out more talented. So the demand, the energy that you have to exert is a lot different. So it's two completely different ballgames, honestly.
We're talking to Mohamed Massaquoi here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. You were selected by the Browns in the 2009 NFL Draft, 50th pick overall in the second round. How about the transition of coming? You kind of described how it's different mentally and preparing, but just coming to the NFL and being a rookie, and you play 4 seasons with the Browns, and just being an NFL player and a man of faith, and just, the demands and the push and the pull and the people wanting autographs and just everything that comes with being an NFL player. What was that like?
That's different too. I think that's probably the one benefit of going to a big time school of understanding just huge fan bases, understanding performing under pressure, whether it be the SEC or the Pac-10 or the Big 12 or Big 10. Some of these premier programs, you see some of it of just rabid fan bases and just being around talented guys. So from that aspect, kind of know what you're getting into, but it's a different life when you come into money, you come into expectations, you understand the business side of it. It takes great teammates, it takes great vets just to help you transition, because nobody can prepare to be a pro unless you learn from someone or you learn through trial and error.
Was it something where you leaned on guys like AJ Green and Noshawn and Stafford and guys that were in the league at the same time as you to just kind of share stories and share, wisdom to help each other out there?
For sure. You're whether it's guys that and that's, I think you build different bonds in the NFL because you're going through a different life-changing transition that only a few people can understand. So I'm very close to a lot of the guys that I was drafted with, or the pro guys that I came into the league with, or just having conversations. Okay, what are you doing with your money? Like, where are you living? Did you buy? Did you rent? How are you training for the off season? How'd you adjust to this new city? I'd never been in Ohio. So just adjusting culturally, adjusting the weather, adjusting to just everything that Ohio had to offer. It's a lot of different things where you literally get a call and then you go to a new place and you learn new people. And it's not as if you go on an interview. It's, hey, you're here, and you're very, very appreciative of it. But at the same time, there's a learning curve as to how to adjust to it.
You mentioned the weather. Do you have a story, maybe that first time you played in one of those bitter cold Cleveland, Ohio days where you were like, oh my goodness, this is not like anything I ever played in before?
Yeah, so I'm from the South, and if they even think it's going to snow, the city shuts down for at least a week. Yep. And I remember the first time it snowed, it was actually during a practice, and I rolled over there and I called up to the facility, and I'm like, hey, what's the adjusted schedule? What's supposed to happen now that it's snowing? And then, like, if you don't get your butt up here right now. And so I ended up being late because that was my first time driving in true snow. And I was probably the guy that was going 15 miles per hour just because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't want to end up in a ditch or anything. But you learn real fast how to adjust to the weather.
Do you remember a game, though? Was it a game where you suited up and you had to play in snow, or you had to play in freezing cold, and it was just different because you still got to run your routes and follow the game plan, but the elements are there?
Yeah. So people for some odd reason think like the worse the weather is, the better it's football weather. They term it as football weather. I 100% disagree. We had 4 games my rookie year where it was in the negatives, whether I think the coldest one was like -15, and you're running around, the ball feels like a brick. The ground feels brick. There's no amount of heat that can save you. There's no amount of hot chocolate that can save you. And instead of serving Gatorade, they're serving chicken broth and hot chocolate on the sideline just to try to keep your body temperature warm. But it's literally nothing. I tried wearing sleeves, that doesn't work. You don't wear sleeves, that doesn't work. It's really just about mental toughness at that point, and hoping that everybody stays healthy and you can get out of there with a win.
I can only imagine. The NFL, it's such a cruel league, too, in so many ways, and you live that. You go through being a starter, and then in 2013, you sign a 2-year deal with the Jaguars. They release you. You sign by the Jets. They let you go, and at 26, you're out of the league. So I wonder about the adjustment going from playing football for so many years and winning, obviously, all those games in high school and having a great career in college to suddenly at 26, you don't have a team to play for. What was that like, and kind of the transition to going through all that?
Well, for me, I think injuries had a big factor in that, where we play a very physical sport, and whether it be concussions or knee injuries or just different things, broken foot, separated shoulder, throughout my career, my body just broke down. So I kind of knew towards the end of it that I only had so much left, but you try to milk it for as much as possible, as much as you can, just because it's a sport that you love and enjoy playing. But as the body goes, there's really nothing that you can do about it at that point. So I kind of understood where it was happening. Mentally, you understand what you can do, but physically, if your body isn't up to the task anymore, you just kind of understand that, hey, I love this game, but I have to walk away.
Was there a time, though, after the injury started to heal, even before the accident, which we'll talk about in just a second here, that you thought you could still play? And it's like, come on, give me a chance. Let me get a workout in something. Or was it, nah, I'm done?
Not at that level. It's so funny. People come off the street and they're like, hey, could I play? Or even now when I work out with a lot of my friends, if you're not devoting that type of time and if your body doesn't have the same pop, the same mojo, it's really hard just because every year there's guys that are coming in bigger, faster, stronger, or there's guys that are extremely talented that they understand the business side of it and they want to keep their jobs. And you can be mentally strong and fit, but if your body and the physical standpoint of it can't hold up to the task, then you just understand that it's better to walk away, or I leave myself to getting hurt even more because things are happening so fast around me.
We're talking to Mohamed Massaquoi here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. All right, let's go to last year, 2017, and the accident. Many people saw you write and share about this publicly with the Players Tribune, and I'll get to that part in a second as well. But just tell us what happened. Tell us how how it came about that you were on an ATV, and then what happened there as you were riding it.
So for me, it was something that we enjoyed doing. Friends and I, and ATV ends up flipping. ATV, one of those things that never expected for something like that to happen. And before I knew it, I was on the ground and my left hand had been crushed. And at the time, didn't really think too much of it because you're a big, strong football player and you figure, okay, I'll get a cast or I'll get a couple of stitches and screws. And before I knew it, I was being helicoptered to the hospital and figuring out that I had my hand amputated. So it was very surreal to think that a hobby could turn very traumatic so fast. All my friends ended up selling their ATV shortly after that, just to make sure that didn't happen again. So yeah.
How many times had you taken the ATV out and rode out with your friends before that accident? Dozens of times? How many times?
Countless times. Yeah, countless times.
And so by that time, you don't even think it's happening. When the accident does happen, when you're in the midst of it, take me to that. Is it more shock? Is it just kind of like, oh, my hand hurts here, but it'll be okay? Take me into sort of what's happening in your mind as the accident happens.
I don't know if you can truly process something like that. I don't know if you can even put it into words when you have something break or you go through something, whether you witness it or if it's happening to you. So I think initially you're thinking, oh my God, I hope I'm okay. But until you come across somebody that's in the medical field that can truly diagnose what happened, you're just praying for the best at that moment. So when it happened, I wouldn't be able to say, hey, this means my hand's getting amputated, because you don't think of losing a body part through any activity whatsoever. It's just not a natural thought that people think about. So it was shock even after it happened, it was shock. There's still some times where I feel shock of saying, okay, dog, I'm really missing 4 fingers right now. I never expected this to happen ever in life.
Tell me about how much pain. You played through a lot of pain in your career. Obviously, you mentioned the injuries, but tell me, was there a lot of pain or was there not a lot of pain, basically, because you said you were shocked?
No, it's mental shock, physical being shocked. You almost feel like you're getting electrocuted when you have nerve pain. So I did football pain compared to amputation pain. You can ratchet that up 1,000 times worse to go through an amputation and have that type of pain.
How quickly, your friends, obviously, after the incident happened, and I assume they take you to the hospital and you get treated right away. Tell me about the aftermath, immediate aftermath.
Yeah, so, how somebody would call an ambulance. I don't have a true gauge of the timing of how everything happened, but calling the ambulance, having the ambulance come to take me to a hospital, then coming to the first hospital and realized that I had to go to another hospital where specialists would be, and getting helicoptered there to getting to those specialists, and coming out the gate with a 12-hour surgery to try to figure out, okay, what can we do here? So it's one of those things that it's a long time, but you have no sense of time when this is happening, because you're trying to stay calm, you're trying to deal with the pain, you're trying to figure out and understand what's happening. Your body's in a state that it hasn't been in before because it's trying to protect itself and heal itself. So there's a lot happening that at that point you just don't have control of.
Did you ever find yourself angry with the Lord at all during the process, especially maybe when you find out that your fingers had to be amputated? Was there any anger or maybe just wrestling with God? Like, why are you doing this, Lord? What are you doing here?
I mean, there's so many emotions. There's so many thoughts. There's so many ups and downs. There's so many, it's hard to put into words what exactly it is that you feel, because it's not a natural feeling. I was talking to someone who was also an amputee, and it's to come into the world with something you fully expect to leave out of the world with that something, and to not have that, whatever it is, if you lose a leg or you lose a hand, you lose whatever it is to you, once you lose that, and you've had it before, it's hard to put it into words what it's not like to have it, because you can remember it. It's not like losing your keys and trying to find them. It's losing a part of you that will never come back, and you know what that part of you feels like. So I don't think I'll ever truly be able to put that into words.
You waited about 10 months to share us publicly with the Players Tribune about the accident. I wonder why you waited so long to make that public. Was that just something that you were trying to work through personally, and why did you finally become to the point where you were able to go public with it?
Well, I think we're in the information age where people are expected to share things in real time and, have every part of their life on display. I think you take as much time as you need to whenever you're dealing with something. And for me, it wasn't about sharing it for other people. I needed time for myself. And I needed time to understand what had happened for myself. And there's still times where there's certain things that I'm not ready to answer. There's certain things that I don't discuss, or there's certain things that I'm still working through and processing, because everyone deals with things in different ways. Everyone copes with things in different ways. Everyone handles things in different ways. And instead of trying to, I guess, fake what you're feeling or, appease, something, it's better to deal with a situation internally. And then when you're ready, I think you can be more authentic. You can be a lot more free. You could be in a position where it doesn't trigger things, and you sharing something doesn't set you back. It's all about growing to that point versus just putting it out there for the sake of something that makes you comfortable.
And the Bible calls us to be thankful in all circumstances, right? And you said in that Players Tribune video that you were thankful for, quote, real things. So I encourage our audience on how you stayed thankful and are staying, I guess, presently thankful in what many would consider a very horrible circumstance. Tell me about being thankful.
It's about perspective. It's about understanding that, instead of losing fingers, I could have easily lost my life. There's been several people that have, lost their life that I've now learned about. Prior to, I didn't understand that level of, trauma involved in it. But in hearing what other people have gone through, now you just think, oh, these things are fun. You enjoy being on them, and it's a hobby to do. But I've learned afterwards just the danger associated with it that I didn't know prior to. So just being here and having this conversation right now, being thankful for that, being thankful to wake up every day, being thankful to continue to grow and feel comfortable every day in this new state of being, and then just not taking life for granted. Life can change and happen very fast.
I guess other than being thankful, which is obviously a very important thing, what are you learning from the Lord now during where you are in this season of life? Since retiring, you worked at Morgan Stanley as a financial advisor. You're currently a speaker, an advocate for fitness, athletes in business, amputee causes, so many good things that you're able to do. But in this season of life, what is the Lord teaching you just about yourself, about Him? What is God teaching you?
Well, you're not as in control as you think you are, and you start to understand that as you go through certain things. And there's certain things that are available to me now that I understand a lot more than I possibly would have at another time in life. So just continuing to learn and listen and let Him guide my life in the way that He sees fit, and being receptive to it.
He is Mohamed Massaquoi, former NFL wide receiver. Thankful for you, my friend, for sharing your story. I know sometimes it's hard to share it, but often when we do, it's an encouragement to others, and I think that that's what's happening here. So listen, I appreciate you being a guest here on the podcast, and wish you nothing but the best going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck to you, and thank you for what you're doing and a great platform that you've created.
And we do thank Mohamed Massaquoi, former NFL wide receiver, for sharing his inspirational story with us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. What a journey, going from NFL player and, really even going back to high school when he never lost a game during his high school football career, and then coming to Georgia and being a very good player. Obviously all SEC first team and getting selected in the second round by the Browns, but then the accident and losing 4 fingers and just what he's learned in that process. Very inspirational. You can follow along Mohamed's journey and stay in touch with him on the internet. MohamedMassaquoi.com is his website, and certainly on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. He is at Iron Massaquoi, IronMassaquoi, Iron Massaquoi on social media. We thank Mohamed for joining us here and sharing his story on the Sports Spectrum podcast. We also thank you for listening. You can reach us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search Sports Spectrum, and you can see all of our content over at sportspectrum.com, where we have daily devotionals and daily content, including articles written on the intersection of sports and faith. We also want to thank our sponsor, Compassion International, $38 a month. This is such a great way for you to make a difference in a child's life. So many of us wonder, okay, how can I make a difference? Where can I take my hard-earned money and put it in a place that will literally make a difference directly to a person or a child? In this case, it's a child that you can change forever. You can change their trajectory by sponsoring them through Compassion International for $38 a month. It's the best $38 you will spend every single month, and you're releasing a child from poverty and giving them exactly what they need: food, education, vocational training, medical care, everything they need, all done in the name of Jesus. It's a great way to make a difference. Compassion International. Go to compassion.com/sportspectrum, compassion.com/sportspectrum. Sponsor a child today. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time right here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Have a great rest of your day.